The engine clicked. Once. Twice. Then went silent. Tomas Yazzie gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white under dry skin. The motel's flickering neon sign glared through the cracked windshield. Cedar Shade Inn. Weekly rates available. A lie. He could afford tonight, maybe tomorrow. After that, the car would be both home and escape plan. In the back seat, Ashki breathed in the slow, rhythmic way of deep sleep, curled under a thin fleece blanket, her shoes tucked beside her like they might walk off without her. She was too old to be sleeping in cars, too small to be carrying the weight of her father's mistakes. Tomas exhaled a long, tired breath that felt like it came from the soles of his boots. He rubbed his face with both hands. His palms were still dirty from unloading boxes that morning at a temp job, cash under the table, just enough to buy canned soup and half a tank of gas. His phone buzzed once on the dashboard. Another voicemail from a number he didn't recognize. He didn't listen. He already knew the script. This is an attempt to collect a debt. The desert night pressed against the windows, cold and endless. Somewhere out in the black stretch past the edge of town, coyotes cried out sharp and close. Tomas closed his eyes just for a moment, leaning his head back against the seat. His stomach ached from too much coffee and not enough food. He was 32, but tonight he felt like someone who had already lived twice that long and hadn't gotten much of it right. A faint rustle broke the stillness. He opened his eyes. A piece of paper flapped under the wiper blade. He hadn't seen anyone approach the car. There were no footsteps, no shadows moving across the lot. Just that slip of white sticking out like a summons from the universe itself. Tomas stepped out into the cold gravel, crunching under his boots. He pulled the paper free, expecting some motel staff notice, maybe another fine, a warning, a ticket. His eyes moved over the top-line Office of Probate Affairs. Coconino County Subject Inheritance Notification. He blinked. For a second, he thought he was reading it wrong. He turned it over. There was more. A cover letter with formal language folded neatly typed in blocky black ink. Mr. Tomas Yazzie, we regret to inform you of the passing of your relative, Ms. Evelyn Nez. His breath caught. He hadn't heard that name in years. Evelyn, his great-aunt. His dad's aunt, technically. She'd lived somewhere in the northern desert, always distant, always strange. She sent Ashki birthday cards once in a while, signed in shaky cursive, usually with $10 bills inside. But Tomas hadn't seen her since he was a kid. The letter went on. Per the attached, will Ms. Nez designated you as the sole beneficiary of her estate. This includes one residential property located at the end of Bitterroot Road outside of Kayenta, Arizona. He read the address 3 times. It didn't make sense. She'd left him a house. He had no home, no savings, no clean answer for Ashki. Every time she asked, "Where are we going next?" And now this woman who barely knew him had left him land. Then came the warnings. Please note, the property is currently uninhabitable. It has been vacant for over a year and has not been maintained. There are documented issues regarding structural safety, water access, and heating. Another page detailed tax records, utilities. Then a handwritten note at the bottom from someone named Mrs. Patterson at the county office. Mr. Yazzie, if you're reading this, I hope you'll at least go look at the place before making any decisions. It's not worth much on paper, but sometimes even broken things are enough. His hands were trembling. He slid back into the car, closed the door gently, so the noise wouldn't wake Ashki. She stirred anyway, mumbling daddy without opening her eyes. I'm here, baby, he said, tucking the blanket up over her shoulders. Go back to sleep. She nodded and turned toward the seat. Tomas stared at the letter again. Inheriting a house was the kind of thing that happened in movies or to people who had their lives mostly together. Not to someone who sold his wedding ring to pay for gas. Not to someone whose daughter had worn the same two small sneakers for 6 months because they couldn't afford new ones. He should have felt suspicious, or bitter, or guarded. Instead, for the first time in months, something stirred beneath the exhaustion curiosity. The next morning, Tomas stood at the edge of the motel parking lot, engine running letter folded in his front pocket, duffel bag packed with everything they owned. Ashki brushed her teeth at the bathroom sink inside the motel lobby, clutching a travel-sized toothpaste tube like treasure. Her long black hair was tied back with a rubber band he'd found on the floor yesterday. When she came out, she squinted up at him. "Where are we going now?" she asked. He crouched to her level. "To see something someone left us. A house." Her eyes went wide. "We have a house, sort of. We'll see. It might be. It's not fancy. But it's ours. Does it have a room I can paint?" That stopped him. His mouth opened, then closed. "I think so," he said. They got in the car. Tomas punched in the address on his cracked GPS, the screen flickering like it was also unsure whether this was a good idea. The route wound north, long stretches of two-lane highway, then gravel, then dirt. The kind of places you didn't end up unless you meant to. Ashki stared out the window, humming to herself, her stuffed animal clutched in one arm. Tomas focused on the road and tried not to imagine what they were driving toward. A collapsed shack, a buried trailer. A landmine of memories. 4 hours later, the last road narrowed into a path that looked more like a dry wash than anything meant for tires. The GPS said they had arrived, but nothing was visible, just juniper trees and quiet hills. Then, past the last bend, the house appeared. It sat low to the ground, partially hidden by brush, its paint worn to the wood shutters, dangling roof patched in places with metal sheets that didn't match. A small window to the left of the door was cracked. A bird's nest rested in the eave above. Tomas parked. The engine stuttered once, then gave up. Ashki pressed her face to the window. "Is this it?" He nodded. She didn't move. He didn't either. Then she whispered, "It's kinda scary." He reached over and took her hand. "Yeah," he said. "It is. I wasn't sure if it was falling down or just waiting for someone to notice it was still standing." The house looked like it had held its breath for years and was still waiting to exhale. Tomas stood at the edge of the yard, if you could call it that, boots planted in dry dirt and low weeds staring at the sagging structure in front of him. The wind kicked up dust along the cracked path leading to the porch, where a rotting bench leaned against the wall, like it had given up trying to stand straight. Ashki didn't get out of the car. She watched from the back seat, silent, her eyes wide and wary. Her small hand clutched her rabbit, the fur worn thin from years of comfort. The house sat low to the earth, its windows clouded with age, its roof a patchwork of rusted metal and curling shingles. A screen door flapped weakly in the wind, hanging from a single hinge. Everything about the place looked forgotten, and still it was theirs. Tomas took a breath, walked to the porch, and stepped up. The wood groaned under his weight. One of the boards cracked clean through beneath his left boot. He shifted to the side, heart thudding. The front door was painted a pale blue once maybe, but most of the color had been stripped by years of sun and sand. The doorknob turned easily, but the door resisted, stuck in its frame. He shoved with his shoulder. It gave way with a groan and a gust of stale air that smelled like dust mildew and old wood. He coughed, pulling his shirt over his nose. Behind him, the car door creaked open. Ashki's footsteps were hesitant on the gravel. She walked up beside him, looking into the shadowy interior. Do we have to go in? She whispered. Yeah, Tomas said. We do. Inside, the dimness was heavy. The air was cooler but thick, like the house had trapped every season since the last time someone lived here. Dust floated in the sunlight, slicing through a broken window. The floorboards creaked with every step. A few pieces of furniture remained: an old couch sagging in the middle, a wooden table missing one leg propped up by a stack of books, a rocking chair turned to face the wall. Ashki hovered just inside the doorway. Is it haunted? She asked. Tomas paused. Maybe. But I don't think the ghosts are mean. The hallway led to two small bedrooms. One door hung loose, tilted on bent hinges. The other opened cleanly. A narrow twin bed sat under a window, the mattress bare and stained. Ashki looked around and said nothing. Her silence filled more space than words could. The kitchen was worse: to counters warped, the sink rust-streaked, cabinets hanging open. A spider web stretched between two handles, swaying gently. Tomas tried the faucet. It sputtered, then coughed up a stream of brown water before settling into a weak trickle. He turned it off. The fridge door creaked when he opened it, and the smell that escaped nearly knocked him back. He closed it fast. That's gonna need some work. In the hallway, he opened a closet and found a few old coats, a broken broom, and a box filled with yellowed papers and receipts. Someone had lived here for a long time and left in a hurry. Ashki had wandered into the room with the small bed. She stood with her hands on her hips, staring at the wall. Can I paint this? She asked suddenly. Tomas blinked. What? The wall? If we clean it. Can I paint it yellow? He looked at her, standing so small and brave in the dusty light. Yeah, he said. If we can clean it, you can paint it whatever color you want. She nodded like a deal had been made and sat cross-legged on the bed, sending up a cloud of dust. That night, they didn't stay inside. Tomas rolled out their sleeping bags in the car. The house didn't feel safe enough yet. No heat, no working locks, strange sounds in the walls. He'd seen droppings near the kitchen cabinets. Probably mice. Maybe worse. They ate dinner from a gas station bag, cold burritos and bottled water. Ashki was quiet. She didn't complain, didn't ask questions. She just leaned against his side as the wind rattled the bushes outside the car. Why'd she give it to us? She asked softly. Tomas watched the sky through the windshield. I don't know. Did you know her? Not really. I think I met her once when I was little. She didn't come around much. Why not? He didn't answer. He didn't know the truth, not fully. Family things had a way of being swept into silence. All he remembered were whispers, Evelyn's name said in low tones, comments about her being too proud, too private, too strange. She'd left the family, or the family had left her. It was never clear which. Ashki yawned and curled tighter into her blanket. Tomas reached over and smoothed her hair back from her forehead. The stars were sharp overhead, unbothered by the mess on earth. Tomas leaned back, letting the weight of the sky press into his chest. He didn't know how to fix a house. He barely knew how to keep going. But this place, it was something. And something was more than nothing. He closed his eyes, but didn't sleep. At dawn, the sky turned the color of burning sage. Tomas got out and walked the perimeter of the house, stepping carefully. The land stretched wide around them, 2, maybe 3 acres. Scrub bushes, dry grass, and far in the distance, a ridge that looked like the spine of the earth. Behind the house, past a rusted shed with a collapsed roof, he saw the bones of a small corral. The wood was sun-bleached fencing, broken in places, but it had once held something. Sheep, maybe. Horses. A life long gone. Back inside, he opened every cabinet, every drawer. One of the kitchen shelves nearly fell when he touched it. He caught it, steadying it with a knee, and noticed something odd, a gap behind the cabinet where the wall didn't line up. Curious, he tugged. The entire cabinet came loose with a loud pop almost too easily. Tomas set it down carefully and stared at the wall behind it. Something was stuffed in the cavity, wrapped in oilcloth, wedged between the studs. He reached in and pulled it out. A box. Metal. Small. Cold to the touch. Ashki's voice floated from the other room, "Daddy." He didn't answer, not yet. His hands shook as he turned the latch and opened the lid. Inside was a stack of plastic-sealed papers. Neat, organized, labeled in handwriting he didn't recognize but somehow felt familiar. He sat at the table leg's uneven floor, creaking beneath him, and began to read. Outside, the wind picked up. The screen door banged once against the frame. Inside, Tomas held his breath. Evelyn didn't keep this land for its worth. She kept it so no one could steal what it meant. The woman's voice was soft, but it landed in Tomas's chest like a stone. He turned toward the open gate, surprised by how easily the stranger had approached without him noticing. She stood just past the corral fence, wrapped in a long denim coat, silver hair tied back with a faded red scarf. Her boots were dusty, and she held a basket in one hand covered with a striped cloth. Tomas stepped away from the broken shed, instinctively brushing the dirt off his jeans. Ashki peeked out the front door, saw the woman, and slipped behind the frame again. The woman didn't move closer. She just gave Tomas a small, tired smile. "You look like her," she said. "Your jaw. The way you squint into the sun, like it's always daring you." He squinted again without meaning to. "Sorry," he said. Do I know you?" She nodded. "Clara Bitzili. Evelyn was my neighbor. Friend, too, when she let people be." Tomas hesitated. "You knew she passed, I did." Clara stepped forward now slowly. "I also knew she left this place to someone. I figured I'd see them eventually." He gestured toward the house with one hand. "Well, here we are." Clara looked past him at the structure. She didn't flinch. Her expression didn't change. "She wouldn't have left it to you unless she thought you'd understand what to do with it," she said. Tomas gave a bitter laugh. "I barely know what to do with myself." Clara studied him for a moment, then set the basket down on the porch. "Fry bread and sheep stew, still warm. I figured whoever showed up wouldn't have had time to cook yet." Tomas blinked. "Thank you." She nodded like it didn't need thanking. Ashki edged out onto the porch, now her rabbit in hand. Her eyes moved from Clara to the basket. Clara smiled. "That for protection?" she asked, pointing to the rabbit. Ashki nodded solemnly. "Good," Clara said. "Every home needs a guardian spirit." Ashki seemed to like that. She stepped closer to Tomas, tugging his sleeve. "Can we eat now?" He glanced at the house, then at Clara. "Would you want to stay? Eat with us." "I've already eaten, but I'll sit for a minute." They sat on the porch together, the food warm in their laps. The desert wind soft for once. Clara pulled out a folded napkin and dabbed at her mouth even though she hadn't taken a bite. "I helped Evelyn settle here," she said. "Long time ago. We weren't blood, but we were something close. She'd had enough of the world by then. Family problems, city noise. She came here to listen to herself." Tomas didn't know what to say. He tore off a piece of fry bread and handed it to Ashki. "She never came around when I was a kid," he said finally. She wouldn't, Clara replied. She believed in giving people space, especially those who didn't know what to do with hers. Ashki looked up. Did she have pets? Clara chuckled. A dog once. Old Mutt. Mean to strangers, loyal as sunrise. Did she have kids? Ashki asked. No. Never married either. This house was her partner. Her work. Her way of saying she still mattered. Tomas looked out at the dry land. The yard was half buried under weeds and brush, but it was wide. Unbothered. She kept it up, he asked. All this Clara nodded. Best she could. You'll find things tucked away. She was like that, always hiding tools in strange places. She liked knowing the land better than anyone else. She used to say, if they don't see its value, they can't take it from you. Tomas reached into his pocket and pulled out one of the papers he'd found in the metal box. He handed it to Clara. She made a deal with a telecom company, fiber optics. Back in the 80s, this land sits between two towers. Clara's eyebrows rose as she read. So she kept this up with that money all this time, looks like it. Clara folded the paper carefully. Smart woman. Didn't trust banks, but she trusted contracts. Tomas chewed slowly. The food settled something in him. Not just his stomach, something deeper, bone level. I don't know what I'm doing here, he admitted. I don't know how to fix roofs or dig wells or patch broken pipes. You think Evelyn did when she started? Clara asked. You learn or you freeze. That's how it works out here. I've got a daughter, he said. She needs more than a roof that leaks. Clara looked over at Ashki, who had stopped eating to pick at the edge of her blanket. You're here, Clara said. That's already more than what this place had a week ago. They sat in silence for a while. Eventually, Clara stood. I live just past the rise that way, she said, pointing west. If you need water or help, come knock. You won't always be welcomed by the town, but some of us know the difference between a stranger and someone coming home. Tomas stood too. Thank you. Really. She gave a small wave to Ashki, then turned and started down the path. Tomas watched her until she vanished behind the rise. Inside the house was still cold and dim, but the stew scent lingered, and Ashki's cheeks were pink now, not pale. Are we going to stay? She asked. Tomas knelt to unzip a duffel bag, pulling out a blanket and a small lamp. We're going to try. Later that evening, Tomas cleared the broken table and set up a makeshift workspace in the corner. He laid out the rest of the documents from the metal box. Easement agreements, payment ledgers, letters from Evelyn to various offices typed, signed, all preserved like a record of quiet survival. He noticed something strange. The payments were consistent annually, deposited each March, indexed to inflation, and most importantly, set to transfer to the listed heir. Him. His name was typed in one of the addendums. Evelyn had updated the contract before she died. He rubbed his face, stunned. It wasn't a fortune, but it was real money, more than he'd seen in a year, and it was coming again. Steady, predictable. He reached for the lamp cord and plugged it into the wall. The bulb flickered on, casting a soft pool of light over Evelyn's handwriting. Ashki padded in from the other room. I think I want to stay here, she said. Tomas looked up. Yeah. It's quiet, she said. And the sky is big. And the ghosts aren't mean. He smiled. Okay. She climbed onto his lap, resting her head on his chest. Can I paint the room yellow? Yeah, he said. We'll find some paint. The wind pushed against the windows, but the house didn't creak as much tonight. And in the silence, Tomas realized he no longer felt like he was trespassing. He was home, or at least on the way there. He looked at me like I might steal something, and I didn't blame him. The bell above the door gave a half-hearted jingle as Tomas stepped inside the Begay Ranch supply store. The place smelled like sawdust, hay, and engine grease, familiar smells that wrapped around him like a scratchy old coat. The floor creaked under heavy boots and fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, their hum cutting through the early morning silence. Behind the counter stood a man built like the desert, broad, sun-worn, carved deep by time and work. His gray braid reached the middle of his back, and his eyes didn't flinch when they met Tomas's. "You need something?" the man asked flatly. Tomas adjusted his ball cap and nodded. "Looking for work. Heard you sometimes take on extra hands." The man didn't answer right away. He just stared. Tomas recognized the look somewhere between suspicion and calculation, the kind of look people gave someone who'd already used up their second chances. "I'm Ray Begay," the man finally said. "This your first time coming around?" Tomas hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, just moved in. Evelyn Nez's old place." Ray's brow lifted slightly. "Didn't know she had people." "Neither did I until the letter showed up," Tomas said, managing a dry smile. "She left it to me." Ray grunted. "House still standing?" "Barely." Another long pause. Ray scratched his jaw. "You ever stocked feed bags?" "Run a forklift. I've unloaded trucks. I can learn the rest." Ray didn't blink. "You reliable, I show up. I work hard. I don't ask for more than what's fair." Ray studied him another few seconds, then finally jerked his head toward the back. "Help unload that pallet by the bay door. If you don't break anything and don't disappear, we'll talk." Tomas nodded once and headed toward the back. The next hour passed in sweat and silence. Grain bags, wire fencing, salt blocks, he moved them all without complaint. No one said much. A younger guy in a Wrangler shirt gave him a once-over but didn't speak. A woman with weathered hands rang up customers at the front without glancing his way. When the pallet was empty, Tomas wiped his face on his sleeve and approached Ray again. Ray didn't look up from his clipboard. "You got boots that'll last more than a week, just bought these second-hand. They'll hold. Come back tomorrow, 7 sharp. You're on probation until I say otherwise." Tomas almost smiled. "Thanks." Ray looked up, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Don't thank me yet. I don't like people who make messes and then expect clean starts." Tomas nodded. "Understood." He walked out with his shoulders straighter than they'd been in weeks. The door jingled again as it shut behind him. Ashki was sitting on the tailgate of the truck, drawing in her notebook, legs swinging. Her face lit up when she saw him. "Did you get it? Looks like I've got a chance. Do we have to go back to the motel?" He shook his head. "We'll stay at the house tonight." Her smile spread wide, and Tomas swore something in his chest loosened at the sight. They drove to the school just past noon, a small red brick building with peeling paint and a basketball hoop out front. Inside, the air smelled of pencil shavings and warm paper. The front office was quiet, cooled by a rattling swamp cooler in the window. The woman behind the desk looked up as Tomas approached, her expression polite but unreadable. "Enrollment?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. For my daughter." Ashki stood beside him, rabbit in hand, quiet but alert. "Name?" the woman asked. "Ashki Yazzie. We just moved into the Bitterroot property. Evelyn Nez's old place." Recognition flickered in the woman's eyes, but her expression didn't soften. Proof of guardianship, Tomas handed over his driver's license and the legal documents from the county office. She reviewed them carefully, lips pressed thin. We'll need immunization records, last report card, any special accommodations from the previous school. I have all that Tomas said, pulling a folder from his bag. She took it and nodded. She can start tomorrow. 3rd grade, Miss Pinto's class. Tomas looked down at Ashki, who clutched her rabbit tighter. Will she be okay here? He asked quietly. The woman looked at Ashki, then at Tomas. She'll be new. That's never easy. But the kids are good. And Miss Pinto's been here 20 years. She'll be all right. They left the office and stepped into the courtyard, where wind scattered leaves across the cracked concrete. A group of boys played tag around the swing set. One paused and stared at Ashki before running off again. She looked mean, Ashki said, as they walked back to the truck. She looked tired, Tomas said, like most grown-ups. Back at the house, the sun was dipping low. Tomas parked by the side of the house where the ground was more stable. He got out and opened the door for Ashki. She stepped out and looked around, then asked, "Do we have lights yet?" The bulbs flicker, but I picked up new ones today. We'll swap them out. Inside, he changed bulbs and tightened sockets. The kitchen glowed with dim yellow light, now enough to cook by. They made rice and beans on the hot plate, sat on the floor, and ate off mismatched plastic plates he'd found in the back of a cupboard. When they finished, Tomas washed the dishes at the sink, while Ashki swept dust from the corners with a small broom. You think the other kids will like me? She asked. Tomas rinsed the last plate. I think they'll be lucky to have you. She grinned. Maybe I'll draw them pictures. I bet they'll love that. That night the wind picked up again. The walls groaned. Something scurried in the attic. But Tomas slept deep and dreamless until the pale light of dawn crept through the broken blinds. The next morning he made scrambled eggs with powdered seasoning, packed Ashki a sandwich, and walked her to the school bus at the end of Bitterroot Road. The driver gave him a once-over, then waved Ashki on board. Tomas watched until the bus disappeared over the hill, then walked back to the house, started the truck, and drove to Begay's. Ray was waiting, arms crossed. You're late. It's 6:58. Ray shrugged. I don't like close calls. Tomas smiled just barely. Understood. Ray handed him a list. You'll be on shelves and deliveries. Don't screw up. Don't disappear. Don't ask dumb questions. Tomas took the list and got to work. Each movement steady. Each moment earned. He didn't know yet that this would become something solid. He didn't know how much harder it would get before it got easier. But for the first time in a long time, he wasn't running. I opened it like I expected bones. What I found was a second chance wrapped in oilcloth. The cabinet had been hanging crooked for days, its hinges warped, sagging just enough to bother Tomas every time he walked past it. He hadn't planned on fixing it that night. He was too tired, the kind of tired that settles into your spine and hums there. But the thing finally gave up when he pulled it open. One hinge popped loose with a dry crack. The whole cabinet tilted forward like it had decided to quit the house altogether. Tomas caught it with both hands, cursing under his breath as he steadied the weight. He eased it down onto the warped kitchen floor, where it rocked unsteadily before tipping over completely. Behind it, tucked between the studs in the wall, was a lump wrapped in stained oilcloth. He froze. At first glance, it didn't look like much, just an old bundle someone had stashed and forgotten. But something about the careful way it was wedged into the wall, the tightness of the wrap, made Tomas pause. He stared at it for a long second, half expecting it to move, or worse, smell. Then he reached out slowly and pulled it free. The bundle was heavy, not bone heavy, paper-heavy, and it made a soft shift when he moved it, like the sound of envelopes sliding against each other. He laid it on the counter and peeled back the cloth. A small dented metal box lay beneath, sealed with a simple latch. Tomas stared at it, heart thudding. He'd seen enough movies to know these moments rarely led to anything good. But he flipped the latch anyway. The lid creaked open. Inside was a stack of documents protected in plastic sleeves, neatly labeled, dated, organized. It looked nothing like the rest of the house. Each folder was handwritten in blocky, precise letters. Easement agreement, 1989. Property maintenance. Taxes beneficiary transfer. T. Yazzie Tomas sat down at the crooked table. He didn't breathe for a full minute. The only sound was the weak buzz of the ceiling bulb above and the wind brushing dry leaves across the porch. He pulled out the first folder, flipping through line after line of legal text. His reading slowed when the words began to make sense. In 1989, Evelyn had signed an easement agreement with a regional telecom company. Her land, positioned between two key infrastructure points, offered the perfect route for a buried fiber line. Rather than sell the land outright, she'd negotiated access in exchange for annual compensation. The terms were clear: $4, $200 annually, adjusted for inflation, paid in perpetuity to the listed property owner or beneficiary. The payments had grown over the years. The most recent statement showed a deposit of $8,000 issued just last March. Tomas flipped to the next folder. Bank deposits, ledgers, payment receipts. Evelyn had kept immaculate records. In the final folder was a notarized addendum to the agreement. The date was from 2 years ago. It listed him by name, Tomas Nez Yazzie, sole heir, and included his old mailing address. She'd planned this. She knew she was dying. She knew the house wouldn't sell, but she also knew someone might need it. Not just the house, the land, the lifeline. He leaned back in the chair, the legs creaking dangerously. A lump formed in his throat, hard and sudden. He didn't cry. He just sat there holding the papers like they might vanish if he let go. The door creaked behind him. Soft footsteps. Ashki padded in, still in her pajamas, rubbing one eye with her fist. "Why's the cabinet on the floor?" she asked, yawning. "Fell off the wall," he said quietly. She walked over and looked at the papers. "Are those from her?" "Yeah," he said. "From your Aunt Evelyn." She reached out and touched the corner of a folder like it might bite. She was smart. She was, Tomas said. Did she know we were going to need help? He nodded. I think she did. Ashki didn't ask more. She climbed into the chair beside him and rested her head on the table, half asleep. Tomas sat there for another hour, rereading the details. Slowly his mind began to shift from shock to calculation. $8,000 a year. No mortgage, no rent. It wouldn't solve everything, but it would cover property taxes, give him breathing room, a chance to pay off some of the crushing debt that had followed him since Maria's funeral, a way to stop the bleeding. At sunrise, Tomas brewed a pot of weak coffee with a salvaged machine he'd found in the shed. The water still ran rusty at first, but it cleared enough to be drinkable. He poured 2 cups, one for himself, one for the idea of Evelyn, and sat on the porch as the sky turned pale gold. He called the county office just after 8 a.m., fingers trembling slightly as he dialed. Office of Land and Property, came a woman's voice. This is Mrs. Patterson. Tomas cleared his throat. Hi, ma'am. My name's Tomas Yazzie. I was the beneficiary of Evelyn Nez's estate. Yes, Mr. Yazzie. We've been expecting your call. You received the documents I did. I've also found more. She chuckled softly. You found her box. I did. That woman kept better records than half the banks I've worked with. I take it you saw the easement. Yes, ma'am. Well, everything she filed with us is up to date. That agreement is still active and binding. The payment for this year should come through again in March. Tomas exhaled slowly. Do I need to do anything? You already did. She filed everything. We just needed to confirm you'd taken possession of the property. I have. Well then, Mrs. Patterson said warmly. Welcome home, Mr. Yazzie. After the call, Tomas walked out to the edge of the backyard. He looked at the crooked fence line, the scattered sagebrush, the dry, open land that had once felt like a punishment. Now it looked different. Not rich. Not easy. But possible. When Ashki came out an hour later dressed for school with her backpack and rabbit in hand, she paused beside him. Can I still paint my room yellow? He smiled. Absolutely, she beamed. They stood there together, father and daughter, on ground someone had fought to keep just long enough for them to need it. The sun was rising behind the old cottonwoods. The house still leaned in places, and the roof still whined in the wind, but Tomas didn't see a ruin anymore. He saw a starting point. A few days later, Tomas stood in line at the post office with a check in hand, his first payment toward a past-due medical bill. It wasn't much, but it was real, and it meant the silence on the other end of his phone might finally start to mean peace, not fear. It was a small thing, but for a man who had nothing, small things could feel like salvation, especially when they came wrapped in oilcloth. I didn't know how to fix a house, but I knew what it felt like to fall apart. The pipe burst at 3 a.m. One moment Tomas was dreaming about nothing in particular, just the rare kind of deep sleep that had eluded him for years, and the next he was standing barefoot in freezing water, blinking at the sound of steady, rushing chaos beneath the kitchen sink. Damn it, he muttered, yanking open the cabinet door. Water sprayed wildly from a rusted joint, flooding the warped floor and soaking through the thin throw rug. He grabbed a towel, pressed it to the brake like that might somehow stop it, and turned off the water valve. It shrieked in protest, but obeyed, and the flow finally slowed to a miserable drip. Ashki appeared in the hallway, blanket around her shoulders like a shawl, her hair wild with sleep. Is it raining inside? Tomas forced a smile. Only under the sink. She stood there watching him clean it up, her small face worried but silent. That part of her being careful not to make things harder hurt him more than the flood. After getting her settled back into bed, he returned to the mess and crouched beside the pipe. The metal was corroded, patched years ago with tape and stubbornness. He stared at it, soaked to the knees, heart pounding from being jolted awake, and felt the weight of everything press down on his chest again. But he didn't panic. Not this time. Instead, he stood, wiped his hands on a rag, and reached for his phone. A weak signal blinked at the edge of the screen. He opened a search page and typed in temporary pipe repair. The video was 6 minutes long and hosted by a man with a heavy accent and an even heavier tool belt. Tomas watched it twice, then replayed the part about clamps 3 more times. He didn't have any clamps, but he had duct tape and an old rag. For now, it would have to do. At sunrise, he drove to Begay's for his shift, his mind still wrapped around water pressure and rusted threads. Ray raised an eyebrow as he walked in. You look like you fought a river. Kitchen pipe gave out, Tomas said. I'll fix it after work. Ray didn't respond with sympathy. Instead, he reached under the counter and tossed Tomas a small toolkit. Take it. Consider it a loan. Just bring it back. Tools don't grow on sagebrush. Tomas caught the kit mid-air. Thanks. The rest of the day was a blur of loading sacks of feed, helping a rancher find the right fencing nails, and memorizing the layout of shelves that made no logical sense but had probably never changed. When the shift ended, Tomas stayed behind a few minutes to scan the plumbing section. He picked up 2 clamps, a replacement elbow joint, and a small tube of sealant. Ray caught him counting out bills at the register. Patch job, temporary fix. Just need it to hold till I can replace the whole line. Ray nodded. You figure things out fast. That's good. Tomas didn't answer. He didn't know what to say to that kind of praise. Back at the house, the kitchen was still damp, but no longer soaked. He knelt beside the sink flashlight between his teeth and got to work. The clamp slipped once, then again. But on the 3rd try, it caught. The sealant smelled sharp and metallic as it spread. When he turned the water back on, the pipe held. It was a tiny victory, but it hummed through his body like a win. Hey, Daddy, Ashki called from the hallway. Come see. He wiped his hands on his jeans and walked down the narrow hallway. Her bedroom was brighter now. She'd hung one of the old sheets like a curtain and pulled open both windows. Sunlight streamed in, hitting the rough plaster walls. On the floor were 3 small rocks arranged in a circle. In the center sat her rabbit like a sacred keeper of secrets. I made her a garden, she said proudly. She's the guardian. Clara said that matters. Tomas crouched beside her. Looks good. Do you think Clara can teach me how to grow real plants? I think if you ask her, she'll say yes. They spent the rest of the evening cleaning. Tomas replaced a broken door latch and tightened screws in a cabinet that had been threatening to collapse. Ashki swept each room twice, humming as she worked. The next day after school, they drove to Clara's. Her small adobe house sat under a gnarled tree, with smooth bark and 1,000 stories. Chickens pecked at the ground nearby, unbothered by visitors. Clara stood on the porch, grinding dried herbs in a stone bowl. You're here about the rabbit garden, she said, not looking up. Ashki giggled. Tomas just nodded. She wants to learn, he said. I figure that's something worth saying yes to. Clara led them to the back, where rows of tired plants still hung on after the cold. She pointed out lavender, wild mint, and onions growing in the shade. This dirt is stubborn, she said, but it remembers what it gave. If you ask right, it'll give again. Ashki listened wide-eyed. Clara handed her a small trowel and a bundle of seeds wrapped in cloth. These are beans, heirloom. I saved them from Evelyn's last harvest. Ashki clutched them like treasure. Did she plant them here every year, Clara said, even when she didn't know if they'd take. Back at the house, Tomas marked a patch of ground near the back fence. He dug deep, turning the soil clearing stones. Ashki dropped seeds into the softened earth and whispered to each one like Clara had told her. Tomas didn't know what they would grow, if anything, but digging into dry dirt felt right, honest, like asking the land to keep a secret. That weekend, Tomas opened another folder from the metal box. It contained Evelyn's handwritten notes, seasonal calendars, frost dates, planting tips, warnings about insects. Her handwriting was tight, deliberate. She'd underlined things like rotate your rows and save your own seed. She'd known what it took to stay put, to live where things didn't come easy. Later, Tomas sat on the porch with a pencil and a scrap of paper, jotting down repairs. He still needed to replace the window in the bathroom, fix the latch on the front gate, scrape and repaint the shutters. The list was long, but it didn't scare him the way it used to. Ashki joined him with a cup of water and sat cross-legged at his feet. I think the house likes us now, she said. It's quieter at night. Tomas looked out across the yard, where the rabbit garden stood guard, and where a line of turned earth waited for spring. Maybe we're learning to listen, he said. That night, they slept without the space heater. The pipe held. The wind stayed outside. And in the stillness, Tomas heard something new, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Belonging. You can fix a door, but it won't matter if the people behind it don't feel safe. Tomas had just finished screwing in the last hinge when he noticed the bruises on Ashki's wrist. They weren't fresh, yellowed around the edges, fading, but they hadn't been there 2 days ago. She was sitting on the porch steps, rabbit in her lap, watching ants crawl over a piece of bread she'd left in the dirt. "What happened?" he asked, trying to keep his voice level. She looked up, blinked, then pulled her sleeve down without a word. "Ash," he said gently, walking over and crouching beside her. "Talk to me." She shrugged. "It's nothing." "Who did that?" Her eyes flicked away. "Just a boy. At school." He waited. "He said I talk weird. Called me a res dog girl. He pushed me when we lined up for recess." Tomas's jaw tightened. "Did you tell your teacher?" she said to ignore it. "Said he does that to everyone. And you?" Ashki's voice dropped to a whisper. "I hit him back." Tomas took a long breath, then pulled her into a hug. She leaned into him without hesitation, her arms small and fierce around his waist. "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself," he said. "But it's not on you to fix other people's mean. That's on grown-ups. That's on me." She nodded, her cheek pressed to his chest. He didn't let go for a long time. That evening, Tomas walked into the school office just before closing. The secretary looked up, her mouth pinched like she'd been waiting all day to go home. "I need to talk to Miss Pinto," Tomas said. "It's about my daughter. She's with a student right now. I can take a message." Tomas's voice stayed calm. "It's not a message kind of thing." After a beat of hesitation, she picked up the phone. "One moment." Miss Pinto came out a few minutes later, her hair slightly frazzled, glasses slipping down her nose. She looked tired, but kind. "Mr. Yazzie." He nodded. "Can we talk?" She led him into a small classroom that smelled faintly of crayons and dry erase markers. Posters lined the walls, phrases like "be kind" and "every voice matters" in big, bubbly letters. Tomas sat across from her at a tiny table meant for children. "I'm guessing this is about Ashki," she said, folding her hands. "She came home with bruises," Tomas said plainly. "Said a boy pushed her. Said he calls her names." Miss Pinto sighed. "Yes, that would be Carson. He's a handful. That's not good enough. I understand and I'm sorry. We're working with him. His home life's not great. That's not my daughter's problem." She blinked. "No, it isn't. She's Navajo. She wears her hair the way her mom used to braid it. She brings bread wrapped in cloth and doesn't talk much unless she trusts you. That doesn't give anyone the right to make her feel small." Miss Pinto nodded slowly. "You're right." He let the silence hang. "I'll speak to the counselor," she said. "We'll separate them in the lunch line. I'll sit them on opposite sides of the room. That's a start. But if he touches her again—" "He won't," she said quickly. "I'll make sure of it." Tomas stood. "Thank you." As he left, she called after him. "She's a good kid. Brave. She shouldn't have to be," Tomas said over his shoulder. Back at the house, he found Clara sitting on the porch with Ashki teaching her how to braid strips of old t-shirts into rag rugs. They were both laughing at something when he arrived, and the sight of it, His daughter, smiling without looking over her shoulder, hit Tomas like sunlight after days of clouds. He sat on the steps beside them. Clara gave him a sideways glance. "You look like a man who just bit into something sour." "I handled something," he said. "Didn't feel like enough." Clara nodded her fingers, still working the fabric. "You're not going to solve the world in one conversation. But I want her to feel safe. I can fix doors, pipes, fences. But how do I fix the parts of the world that keep trying to break her?" "You can't," Clara said. "But you can teach her how to stand. You already are." Ashki didn't look up, but she leaned her shoulder against his. "Is it okay if we don't send her back there?" Tomas asked quietly. Clara raised an eyebrow. "You gonna homeschool her? I don't know. I just know that Bruce felt like mine. Then maybe the problem's bigger than the boy." That night, Tomas sat up late scrolling on his phone. He looked up local laws, read about district transfers, scanned pages of online teaching tools. Most of it blurred together in frustration. He thought about Evelyn, about how she'd lived half her life away from people, how she'd picked peace over company. But Ashki wasn't Evelyn. She needed people, just not ones who saw her as less. The next morning, Tomas asked her gently if she wanted to go back. She paused, then shook her head. "Okay," he said. "We'll figure something out." The following week, Clara introduced him to Elsie, her cousin, a retired school teacher who had taught for 40 years in Window Rock. She now ran a small learning group out of her home for children who didn't fit into the system well. "She's got a strict voice but a soft heart," Clara warned. "Like old cottonwood bark." When they met her, Elsie looked over Ashki with a discerning eye, asked her 3 questions about numbers, then handed her a picture book and said, "Start here. You read, I'll listen." By the end of the hour, Ashki had read 3 pages aloud and was curled up on the rug beside another girl about her age. Tomas stood in the doorway, arms crossed, something settling in his chest, like a puzzle piece finding its place. Elsie didn't look at him as she spoke. "She's got a mind like open land. Don't let anyone fence it too soon." He nodded, throat tight. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We start early. I expect lunch packed, and no rabbits in the classroom." Ashki giggled behind her hand. On the way home, Tomas pulled over at the edge of the ridge and let the truck idle while they looked out over the valley. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "I liked her. She didn't talk to me like I was a baby." "You're not," he said. "You're a warrior." She smiled. "But can warriors still bring rabbits to school?" He laughed. "Only the smart ones." The wind picked up, brushing through the open windows. Below them, the land stretched wide and unbothered. And for the first time in a long time, Tomas felt like he wasn't just surviving. He was building something stronger than walls. The roof didn't collapse that night, but something else did, something quieter, heavier, and harder to fix. The storm rolled in just after midnight, a dry thunder growling over the hills like a warning shot. Tomas woke to the faint creak of the wind lifting the edge of the metal roof, the old screws whining in protest. He reached for the flashlight beside his bed before remembering they'd finally replaced the bedroom lamp with a working one. Light clicked on. The shadows danced across the cracked ceiling. Beside him, the bed where Ashki slept was empty. He got up quickly, heart already racing, and found her curled on the couch, rabbit in her arms, wide awake. "Storm too loud?" he asked softly. She nodded, eyes fixed on the windows rattling in their frames. Tomas crossed the room and sat beside her. "It's just wind," he said. "Desert tantrum. All noise. I heard something on the roof." He listened. Above, metal scraped against wood like a slow, deliberate breath. "I'll check it in the morning." She looked up. "Promise, I promise." They sat like that for a while, the wind pressing against the house, looking for cracks. Outside, branches scraped against the siding, and sand hissed across the windows. Tomas didn't sleep again. When dawn broke, the storm had passed, leaving behind the smell of wet dust and a sky that looked scrubbed raw. Tomas climbed onto the roof with a borrowed ladder, carefully testing each panel. Near the northeast corner, 2 screws had come loose, and the edge of the sheet metal had curled upward like a peeling scab. He crouched there for a long time, staring at the exposed gap beneath the tin. That part of the attic wasn't insulated. If more rain had come, it would have leaked straight into Ashkey's room. He tightened the screws, added washers where he could, and marked the whole section for replacement. It wasn't urgent, but it was a reminder this house didn't forgive neglect. It needed watching. Back inside, Ashkey handed him a drawing she'd made him on the roof, holding a comically large wrench while she stood below with her rabbit wearing a helmet. "I'm going to put this on the wall," he said, grinning. "You look like a superhero," she told him. He didn't feel like one, but he pinned it above the kitchen table anyway. At work, Ray noticed his limp before Tomas said anything. "You fall off something, just fixing what the wind almost broke." Ray nodded. "You want more hours next week? I could use another delivery driver if you can handle the van." Tomas blinked. "That would help." "You've earned it," Ray said, then added, "Don't mess it up." That afternoon, Tomas stopped at the county records office to file paperwork, confirming his residence status, and to verify that the easement agreement was still active under his name. Mrs. Patterson looked up over her glasses. "You're really making this stick, huh?" "That's the plan. You'd be surprised how many people try and sell that land within a year. But you're fixing things." "I'm trying." She stamped the form and handed it back. "Well, it's working." At home, he found a brown envelope in the mailbox marked only with his name and a return address from a law firm in Santa Fe. Inside was a letter typed and dry, "To the legal heir of Evelyn Nez. We are writing to inform you that the fiber optic easement referenced in your deed is currently under review for expansion by the New Mexico Regional Development Council. Your property may qualify for a renegotiated lease agreement. Please contact us if interested in reviewing the proposed terms." Tomas read the letter twice. More money. Not guaranteed, but possible. He folded it up carefully and tucked it beside Evelyn's old ledgers. Then he sat down, staring at the pile of patchwork papers and receipts spread across the table. The roof, the pipes, the taxes, the truck repairs, it all spun in his head like gears with no grease. The house had stopped falling apart. But he hadn't. Later that night, Clara stopped by with a jar of beans and a bag of dried apples. "You got dark eyes," she said as soon as he opened the door. "I didn't sleep." "Then sleep. This place doesn't need you to die trying." He leaned against the frame. "I'm fine." She snorted. "You're stubborn. That's not the same." Ashkey came out with her drawing. "Look what I made." Clara examined it. "You gave him good shoulders. But that wrench is too clean to be real." Ashkey giggled and dashed back to her room. Clara stepped closer. "You ever ask for help? I'm used to doing it myself." "Yeah, well, that's not always noble. Sometimes it's just scared." He didn't answer. She handed him the bag. "You're not alone, even if it feels that way." After she left, Tomas sat in the quiet house. The wind had calmed the sky clear, but something still tugged at the edges of him, a frayed thread he couldn't name. He remembered Maria's voice from years ago, the way she'd whisper when the world got loud. "We're not broken, just tired." Rest is part of the fight, too. That night he let the silence stay. He didn't fill it with hammering or repairs. He didn't check the attic or fix the loose hinge on the screen door. He just lay beside his daughter, listening to her breathe, letting the house creak without panic. The roof held. The wind passed. And for the first time in weeks, he let himself feel the crack not as a weakness, but as proof he was still standing. She said it like it wasn't a question, "You belong here now." And for the first time, I didn't argue. Tomas stood behind the counter of Begay Ranch Supply, ringing up a coil of fencing wire for a rancher who barely said 2 words. Outside, the sky was cracked wide open with blue, the kind that only shows up after weeks of desert wind. Inside, everything felt still. Not quiet, but steady. Routine. That was new. Ray had been gone 2 days visiting his sister down in Tohatchi. He'd left Tomas in charge. Not officially, Ray would never say it out loud, but handing him the key to the side door and muttering, "Don't burn the place down," counted for something. Tomas didn't burn anything. He balanced the till, reordered feed, and even helped a young couple pick out supplies for their first chicken coop. It felt almost like a regular life. Something dependable. Something earned. That afternoon, Clara dropped by. She walked through the door like she'd always belonged in that store, with a canvas sack over one shoulder and her gray braid catching light. "I'm looking for tomato cages," she said, placing the sack on the counter. "And I brought you these." Tomas peeked inside, fresh tortillas wrapped in a cloth still warm. "You didn't have to." "You've been skipping meals," she said plainly. "Your face looks sharper than usual." "That's not a compliment." He smiled, small but real. "Thank you." She waved it off. "Tomato cages, aisle 4. She didn't head there immediately. Instead, she leaned on the counter and looked at him like she was measuring something deeper than weight or worth. "You know," she said, "Evelyn wasn't much for small talk. But she used to say, if a house doesn't spit you out in the first winter, maybe it wants you to stay." Tomas tilted his head. "And if it's the second winter," she'd say, "then it's not just a house anymore." He didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. Clara didn't push. She never did. She found her cages paid in cash and left with a nod that carried more weight than a full conversation. That evening, Tomas picked up Ashki from Elsie's. Her cheeks were flushed from running hair full of loose braids and wild stories. She clutched a worksheet in one hand and a green bean pod in the other. "Elsie says I can start helping in the big garden," she said proudly. She said, "I've got patient hands." "You do," Tomas said. "Clara helped me plant some more seeds. I want our house to have corn next year. Real corn. We'll plant a whole row." Back at home, the rabbit garden had grown wild. The old fence Evelyn had put up was tilting, but still held. Tomas knelt beside it, checking the soil, the roots, the way the sun hit just right around late afternoon. That night, he sat down with his notebook, the same one he'd started using when the repairs began. But instead of listing problems, he began writing down what was working. Pipe under kitchen sealed, roof patch holding, water heater reliable, Ashki, steady learning, laughing. Me tired but less hollow. He stared at that last line, then underlined it once. Later, he stood at the back fence looking out at the land. The moon lit up the hills like old ghosts had laid down to rest. Coyotes called in the distance. The breeze brought the scent of juniper and dry earth. For the first time in months, he didn't feel like he was waiting for something to go wrong. He just stood there. The next morning, Elsie invited Tomas to speak to her little group of students. They were learning about family history and land rights, and she thought it might be good for them to hear a story that wasn't from a textbook. He didn't want to at first. He didn't see himself as someone with a story worth telling. But when he sat in front of the kids, Ashki grinning in the front row, he found himself talking not about the broken pipes or sleepless nights, but about the way his mother used to hum while shelling beans, how Maria braided Ashki's hair like threading prayers, and how sometimes you inherit more than land. You inherit the weight too and the chance to carry it differently. When he finished, one of the boys raised his hand and asked, "Do you miss your old house?" Tomas shook his head. "No, because I didn't have one. Not really. Not like this." Elsie, standing in the back, gave him the smallest nod. That night, Tomas found a letter in the mailbox from the Regional Development Council. The proposal was real. They wanted to renegotiate the easement, triple the annual payment, in exchange for a 20-year commitment and a utility right-of-way on a narrow edge of the property. There was paperwork, of course, legal language and cautions. He didn't open it right away. He placed it on the table and made dinner beans, fried bread, a little meat from the freezer. He and Ashki ate by lantern light because the kitchen bulb had finally blown. Neither of them minded. After she went to bed, he sat down with the letter read every line twice and then again. He folded it neatly and placed it in the metal box where Evelyn had kept her papers. He'd make the call tomorrow, but not out of desperation. This time, it would be a choice. Later, as he stepped outside, he found Clara standing by the fence sipping something from a tin mug. "You're out late," he said. Felt like walking. He joined her. They didn't talk for a while. Finally, she said, "You've put roots down." Didn't plan to. Most good things aren't planned. He nodded. She looked at him, her gaze steady. "You belong here now." He didn't argue. He watched the wind move through the grass, soft and certain. For the first time in years, Tomas felt that the land wasn't just something he stood on, it was something that held him up. You don't rebuild a life in one season, but some seasons show you how far you've come. Tomas sat on the porch watching the sun rise over the eastern hills, a chipped mug of coffee warming his hands. The air was crisp and carried the scent of earth rich and honest from last night's rain. Dew clung to the wooden railings and shimmered like glass in the soft light. Below the garden plot stretched green and uneven rows of beans, reaching higher than he'd expected. Corn shoots stood strong and wild mint hugged the fence. It wasn't the neatest garden, but it was alive, stubborn, and moving forward. Just like them. Inside, he heard soft footsteps and the creak of a door. Ashki padded out in her socks, wrapped in a woven shawl that had once belonged to her mother. She leaned into him wordlessly and took the mug when he offered it, sipping even though the coffee was too bitter for her. "The corn's taller than yesterday," she said, blinking sleep from her eyes. "It's getting there." Clara said, "If it tassels before the full moon, it means the soil's strong." Tomas nodded, smiling into his cup. Clara knows her signs. They sat together in the quiet, broken only by the distant hum of a truck on the road and the occasional bird breaking the hush. These mornings had become a ritual, no alarms, no rush, just a few moments before the day claimed them. After breakfast, they loaded the truck with scrap wood and old fencing. The county was hosting a community workday to clean up the school grounds and repaint the old rec hall. Elsie had mentioned it last week, and Ashki had practically begged to go. Tomas didn't mind. It felt good to show up for something not out of obligation, but choice. At the school, the parking lot was already buzzing with pickups and voices. Kids chased each other with paint rollers while adults carried buckets, cleared weeds, and patched up playground boards. Ray was there holding a clipboard like it owed him money. When he saw Tomas, he raised an eyebrow. "Well, look who decided to socialize." Tomas grinned. "Trying something new. Put those arms to use, then." We're short on ladder climbers. He spent the next 2 hours sanding window frames and repainting trim. The sun crept higher, baking the dirt into cracked plates, but Tomas barely noticed. His muscles burned, but it was the good kind of sore, the kind that reminded him he was still part of something. Across the lot, Ashki helped Elsie dig a narrow trench for planting flowers. She was covered in dirt up to her elbows and laughing with a group of kids he didn't recognize. At one point, she caught his eye and waved her smile easy and bright. Tomas raised his hand in return, chest aching, with a quiet, unfamiliar peace. After lunch, bologna sandwiches and lemonade under a sagging canopy, Clara pulled Tomas aside. "You hear about the Chavez place?" she asked. "No. Foreclosed. County's selling it. Used to be the feedlot before Ray bought up his part." Tomas tilted his head. "What's left of it?" "Old shop. Few silos. Decent land. Needs work." He frowned, unsure why she was telling him this. Clara's voice dropped. "You ever think about something of your own? I've got the house. I mean more than that. A trade. A place to build something long-term." Tomas looked out at the lot where Ashki was now spraying water at a laughing boy who tried to duck. He thought about the way the house had once felt like a burden and now felt like a shelter. The way repairing it had shifted something in him. "I don't have that kind of money," he said. Clara gave him a look. "You've got stability. You've got the easement, and you've got people who'd vouch for you." He didn't answer right away. Later that week, he drove out to see the property. The gate was rusted and hung crooked on its hinges. The buildings were sun-faded and scattered with debris, but there was a large workshop, concrete floors, and a view of the distant ridgeline that made him stop and stare. Inside, the dust was thick, but the bones were good workbenches still intact. A walk-in cooler that could be refurbished, a back office with a small safe bolted to the floor. It smelled like time. Not decay, just waiting. He ran his fingers over the frame of the front door, where a faded sign still hung, Chavez & Sons Livestock Supply. He could see it, T. Yazzie Feed and Repair. A place where people came not just to buy supplies, but to ask advice, to swap stories, to feel less alone. He didn't tell anyone right away. He went home, tucked the idea deep, and sat at the table with Evelyn's ledgers. He ran numbers, wrote questions, then tore the page and started again. That night, he walked out to the back porch where Ashki was sitting cross-legged with her rabbit beside her. "Did you know," she said without looking up, "that bunnies eat clover but not onion greens?" "I didn't. They're picky." Tomas smiled and sat beside her. "Hey," he said, "if we had a place with a bigger yard, more space, would you want that?" She turned to him. "Would the garden come too?" "Of course." "Then yes." He looked out at the horizon, the sky burning orange at the edges. Somewhere beyond that was paperwork, negotiations, maybe a loan, risk, uncertainty. But closer, right here, was a girl who had learned to grow things, a man who had learned to stay, and a home that hadn't fallen apart. The season hadn't fixed everything, but it had shown them what was possible, and that Tomas thought was enough to begin again. They didn't hand me a key to a business. They handed me a choice, and this time I said yes. Tomas stood in front of the old Chavez feed shop, with his hands in his pockets, watching dust swirl in lazy spirals across the lot. The real estate agent, a square-shouldered man with a white cowboy hat and paperwork tucked under one arm, had already gone back to his truck. The place was his for real, on paper sealed with signatures and a tight handshake. But Tomas hadn't stepped inside yet. He just stood there looking at the sun-bleached sign hanging above the door. A few of the letters had worn off, but the history remained like smoke in old wood. He could feel Evelyn's ledger tucked under his arm, the same one that had helped him understand the rhythm of repair, the weight of keeping things going. She would have said something dry but warm like, "Took you long enough." He could almost hear it. With a slow breath, he stepped inside. The air was dry and thick with old sawdust and faint oil. Light filtered through cracked windows, casting bars of gold across the concrete floor. The shelves were mostly empty, but still stood in neat rows. Some held forgotten items, half-used seed bags, rusted bolts, an old broom missing half its bristles. He walked through the space in silence, tracing the edges of what could be. In the back office, a cracked leather chair faced a desk scarred with knife marks and sun damage. He ran a hand over the surface. It felt sturdy, used, but not defeated. That's how he felt, too. He sat down, opened Evelyn's ledger, and placed it next to a fresh notebook. In the new one, he wrote 3 lines: paint walls, order shelves, reopen by fall. Then he added a 4th. Make it ours. Later that afternoon, he drove back to the house. Ashki was outside tying string between stakes in the garden, creating straight lines like Elsie had taught her. The rabbit sat in the shade, chewing lazily on clover. "Did you get it?" she asked without looking up. "I did." She looked over and grinned. "You gonna be the boss now, I guess so. Do I get to be assistant boss?" "Absolutely." Inside, Tomas sat at the kitchen table with the contract and loan documents spread out. Clara came by to drop off some extra wood stain and eyed the papers with a smirk. "You sure this is the road you want?" she asked. "It's not a road," he said. "It's a route." She nodded, impressed. "Look at you sounding like you belong." Tomas smiled but didn't answer. He was still learning to accept good things without waiting for them to vanish. He started small. That weekend, he and Ray took 2 truckloads of scrap to the dump. Ray didn't say much, just grunted and pointed, but his silence felt like trust. "You know," Ray said as they lifted a busted shelf into the bed, "when I started, I didn't know jack about running a place." Tomas raised an eyebrow. "So what changed?" Ray shrugged. "I kept showing up. Turns out that counts for more than you'd think." Tomas nodded. "Yeah, I'm starting to believe that." Back at the feed shop, he scrubbed the counters clean, sanded down the front door, and fixed the light over the main aisle. He hung a new sign out front. Nothing fancy, just block letters carved by hand and painted white: Yazzie Supply and Repair. Clara cried a little when she saw it. She didn't admit it, but she wiped her eyes quick when she thought no one was watching. Word spread fast. By the end of the second week, 3 neighbors had already stopped by, asking when he'd start taking orders. He wasn't ready yet, but it didn't stop them from dropping off tools to fix or offering shelves they didn't need anymore. One night, Ashki helped him paint the front windows. They didn't try to be perfect. They just painted what they saw: a rabbit in a garden corn growing from a cracked pot, and a little house with light spilling out the door. People slowed down when they drove by after that. Tomas found himself waking up earlier, eating full meals, writing in his notebook every day. Not because things were easy, but because now, even when things were hard, they had shape, a direction, a reason. When Elsie brought her class for a visit, Tomas gave them a tour like a real shop owner. He showed them the supply room, let them test a scale, and gave each kid a seed packet with their name written in marker. Ashki handed them out proudly. "We're gonna grow things that last," she told them. That night, Tomas stood alone in the shop after locking up. The moonlight poured in through the front windows, catching the curves of the painted rabbit and corn. He sat behind the desk where he'd moved the new ledger, Evelyn's notebook, and a photo of Maria holding baby Ashki on the porch of their old apartment. He looked at it a long time. You'd laugh if you saw this, he said softly. I didn't even own a toolbox back then. The wind blew against the building, soft but steady. He thought of that first night in the house, how everything felt like it might fall apart. How nothing back then felt earned, only inherited. But this place, this shop, it was both. Built from the pieces of what had been and the quiet labor of what came next. He leaned back, closed his eyes for a moment, and felt something rare and weightless press down on him. Not grief, not fear. Peace. The kind that doesn't come all at once but grows like roots through dry ground. And he welcomed it. Somewhere along the way, we stopped waiting for rescue and started being the reason things got better. It was nearly dusk and the sky looked painted by fire. The air was thick with summer's last heat, but the breeze had changed cooler, edged with the scent of wild sage and dry grass. Tomas stood on the back porch of the house, the same house that once felt like a burden too heavy to carry. Now it felt lived in, weathered, and true. Ashki ran across the yard barefoot, chasing her rabbit, who darted between the corn rows like a streak of brown lightning. She laughed when she tripped, then rolled onto her back in the dirt, arms out wide, staring up at the sky. "You okay?" Tomas called. "I'm not made of glass," she shouted back, grinning. He chuckled, walked down the steps, and joined her by the edge of the garden. The plants had grown tall, beans climbing squash, sprawling sunflowers nodding in the breeze. They weren't perfect rows, and weeds still fought for space, but they were real. Grown with their hands, their sweat, their time. "You've got dirt on your face," he said, sitting beside her. "It's nature paint," she replied. "I'm part of the land now." Tomas looked at her hair, wild cheeks, streaked eyes, glowing like the sun had found a home inside her. She wasn't the same girl who'd hidden behind silence and old sweaters. She'd grown taller, bolder, steadier, and he'd grown too. At the shop, things had finally started running like a proper business. Orders were coming in steady, now small ranch repairs, feed deliveries, some custom builds. Ray had retired completely and dropped by once a week just to pester Tomas and drink free coffee. Clara managed the front counter on weekends when she wasn't at the farmer's market. They'd painted the outside a soft clay red, put up a wooden sign with carved letters that read, "If it matters, we'll help fix it." People liked that. But more than the shop's success, it was the way people came dropping by, not just for bolts and fertilizer, but because they knew they'd be seen. They'd be heard. Tomas didn't rush folks. He didn't treat them like a task. And in return, they trusted him. Somewhere Evelyn's spirit smiled. Tomas leaned back in the dirt beside his daughter. The sky was bleeding orange into purple. A hawk circled far above, then vanished behind the trees. "You know what today is?" he asked. Ashki scrunched her nose. "Saturday." "Well, yeah. But it's also the anniversary of when we moved in." She looked around. "Huh. It's been a year. One full turn of the sun." Ashki sat up, brushing dirt from her knees. "Feels longer. Good longer or bad longer? Good. Like we always lived here, but we just forgot for a while." He nodded, moved by how easily she spoke truth. They went inside together, washed their hands, and ate dinner by lantern light, again on purpose this time. Tomas liked how the shadows made the room feel warmer, like Evelyn's old stories might still be hiding in the corners. After dishes, Ashki pulled out her school journal. "I wrote something," she said, "for class. It's about home." Tomas set down his mug and gave her his full attention. She cleared her throat, then read, "Home is not walls or roof. Home is where the garden grows crooked but strong, where the coffee is bitter and the hands are warm, where rabbits wear names and girls wear dirt, where people come tired and leave lighter, where dad says we more than I." That's my home. And I'm not leaving. Tomas blinked, chest aching. You like it? She asked. He swallowed hard. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. She beamed. Later, as she got ready for bed, Tomas stepped outside. The stars were clear, crisp, and infinite. Clara appeared at the gate with a basket of pears and a tired smile. Brought these before the coyotes do, she said, handing them over. He took them with thanks, then looked out past the hills. She wrote about the house in her journal, he said. Clara smirked. That child's more rooted than most adults I know. I didn't think we'd make it this far. You didn't just make it, she said. You changed what this place means. Tomas looked back at the porch, the light spilling through the curtain, the smell of soap and wood smoke in the air. I think I finally believe we belong. Clara put a hand on his shoulder. You always did. Took you a while to catch up. They stood there a moment longer, two silhouettes carved out by memory and dust, and something stronger than both choice. Because Tomas had chosen to stay, chosen to build, chosen to be the one who didn't run this time. The wind picked up gentle like breath. Inside, Ashki turned off her light and curled up under her quilt, the rabbit already snoring by her feet. Tomas followed soon after, pausing at the door to look around the small, stubborn house. It was crooked in places. It creaked when the wind hit just right. Some windows still stuck, and the floor in the hallway sloped just a little to the left. But it was theirs, and every corner of it held the sound of healing. He turned off the light. Outside, the land listened and held them close.